What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here, and I want to talk about Star Wars The Force Awakens. This movie came out late Thursday night, I believe, and I was only able to get around to watching it Saturday evening, and so I basically had to take a break from the internet for a couple of days and just kind of try and stay away from all the spoilers about this movie, and pretty much I was able to do that. I went into this movie absolutely cold. I had not seen any trailers for this movie at all going in to see it. And I did enjoy this movie quite a bit, but I did have some issues with this movie, and based on what I've been seeing on the internet, it seems like I am one of the only people who did have issues with this movie. A lot of other people are saying this is the greatest Star Wars movie of all time. I'm seeing some people say that it is second only to Empire Strikes Back and that it's better than all the other movies, and I feel like this is a very enjoyable movie. I had a heck of a good time watching this movie, but it is not a perfect film. And I want to go ahead and say I'm not going to set out to try and spoil every single moment of this movie, but this is going to be a very spoiler-heavy review of this film. There's one particular moment that is a huge spoiler that I am going to be talking about, if briefly, but even my overall thesis statement about this movie that I'm going to be making in this video is very spoilery whenever you sit down and talk about it. So if you haven't seen the movie, if you're wanting to watch this review to kind of get an idea of if you should watch the movie, just know that I like this movie, but it does have some problems, and I am not as in love with this movie as everyone else seems to be. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't like spoilers, turn this video off right now because there's going to be some huge spoilers starting now. So my big problem with The Force Awakens is that this is not a sequel to the original trilogy. This is a remake of the original trilogy. Specifically, this is a remake of Episode 4. And what I mean by that is that I felt like the whole time that I was watching this movie that I had seen this movie before. I feel like almost beat for beat, the plot is almost identical to Episode 4 with a few minor tweaks, and I feel like almost all of the major characters in this story are basically remakes of characters that we saw in Episode 4. You've got Rey. We'll start with her. She is basically the girl who lives on a desert planet, and she wants more in her life. She wants to go out and have adventures, although she kind of has this connection with her past life, and she doesn't fully want to leave that behind. And she's a little different from Luke Skywalker, but she's basically the new Luke Skywalker. And then you've got Finn, who is a stormtrooper who leaves his past life behind, and basically he doesn't want to have anything to do with the First Order, which is more or less the sequel to the Empire. They are what's left of the Empire from the original trilogy, although they are calling themselves the First Order. And he's more or less the Han Solo of this trilogy. Although, and I say trilogy, I mean this movie, but I think we all know it is going to be a trilogy. They've already got a set date for when the next movie is going to come out. And Finn is probably the most original, most unique character in this movie. I say that he is the Han Solo of this movie because he's kind of the dashing adventure hero who is befriended by the other hero of the piece and is kind of helping her throughout the movie, but he's not the central focus of the movie. And throughout the film, I was kind of unsure. I was like, is he going to be the central focus or is she? And by the end of the movie, it's pretty clear she is the main focus of the film. And he's kind of second banana to her, kind of like how Han Solo was second banana to Luke Skywalker. But his arc is not exactly like Han Solo's. He does get his own arc, even more so than I would say Han Solo did in A New Hope. Although he did get an arc, I would say that Finn gets more of an arc here. And then you've got Han Solo, who is kind of sort of the Obi-Wan Kenobi to this new generation of heroes. He is a hero from the past, and he's grizzled, and he's seen some stuff, and now he's here to kind of guide these new people into this world that we've known through 6 films and are coming to know in a 7th film, and he's kind of transitioning them from being non-playable characters, if you will, into being a major part of this story. And then here's where a huge spoiler comes in. He gets killed by the big bad guy, and the big bad guy is somebody that he has a relationship to, just like how Obi-Wan Kenobi had a friend relationship with Darth Vader before Darth Vader turned to the dark side, and then Darth Vader killed Obi-Wan Kenobi. Han Solo, huge spoiler here, is the father of the big bad guy of this movie, Kylo Ren. And that's something that I had no idea going into this movie. And I'm sure there was a lot of people who analyzed every second of the trailer, of every trailer for this movie, and they probably already knew that. I did not know that going in, so I was very surprised and very happy to be surprised that Kylo Ren is Han and Leia's son. And basically, at some point in between Return of the Jedi and this movie, Luke was starting up a new Jedi Order, and then Kylo Ren betrayed Luke, and he went and joined this guy named Supreme Leader Snoke. And we don't really know much about Supreme Leader Snoke, but he is basically the new Emperor. He is calling the shots and kind of manipulating everything from behind the scenes. And then you've got Bill Weasley from the Harry Potter movies, and he is the new Moff Tarkin. Kylo Ren is obviously the new Vader, who has a familial relationship with one or more of the main characters from this story. And so when you kind of look at all of these characters from that perspective, it's kind of hard not to look at this as a remake of Episode 4. And it's not exactly a remake of Episode 4, like beat by beat. There are a few minor things. For example, we didn't find out hardly anything about Darth Vader until Empire Strikes Back. In A New Hope, we were just told that he was a pupil of Obi-Wan Kenobi who turned to the dark side. We find out pretty early in this film that Kylo Ren is Han Solo's son, Han and Leia. And so it's not like they're trying to hold that reveal for the Empire Strikes Back of this trilogy. They're kind of giving us that pretty early on, and I'm not sure if they're going to try and make Kylo Ren eventually redeem himself, kind of like how Vader did in the original trilogy. Personally, just my personal preference, I hope that Kylo Ren stays a bad guy throughout. I think if this trilogy wants to find its own identity and kind of find what it wants to be and be different from the original trilogy, it would be very important that Kylo Ren stays a bad guy. That this doesn't become about his redemption after he's done some really bad stuff, like kill his own father. That's something that personally I want to see happen. I don't want to see this become all the good guys are trying to convince Kylo Ren to get rid of the dark side and come join them on the light side. I really don't want that to happen. But basically, when you get past all of that, if you're able to forgive this movie for being a remake of A New Hope, then it's a very good, fun movie. It's extremely entertaining. I had a lot of fun watching it. There were people for months, even pretty much ever since Disney announced that they purchased Lucasfilms, people were saying, okay, are we going to be getting the prequel quality movies, or are we going to be getting original trilogy quality movies? And there are some people out there saying that this is even better than A New Hope. I'm going to disagree. I feel like A New Hope, while it does have some plot problems, plot holes, if you will, and a lot of the CGI is dated, and a lot of the film is dated because that movie is like 40 years old by this point, I still feel like there's something to be said for a movie like that that is so incredibly inventive, not only with the world that it creates, but also just all of the small concepts, small and big. I mean, this is the movie that gave us everything that spawned this huge juggernaut of a franchise that now has had 7 films, plus a few other films that don't really count as being part of the main line of films. I mean, it's just so important, I feel like, in the grand scheme of things, and I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to say that there is another movie that's better than A New Hope. But this movie does have some really amazing special effects. Usually I'm not a special effects guy, but this has some really good special effects. It has some really funny lines. Not to spoil it, but I think that the best line of the movie, shockingly, comes from C-3PO, who's a character who I normally don't care about 3PO. He's kind of annoying most of the time, but I feel like he has the best line in this movie. But there's some really good stuff here. Since I've already mentioned that Han Solo dies in this movie, it reminds me a lot of before Harold Ramis passed away, and there were talks about there being a Ghostbusters 3 featuring the original characters from the first 2 Ghostbusters movies. Bill Murray kept saying the only way that he would come back for a Ghostbusters 3 is if they killed him off. And I kind of feel like Harrison Ford was saying something very similar to J.J. Abrams and whoever else is behind these Star Wars movies. He was saying, look, I don't mind if you bring me back, but just one time, and I want you to kill me off, give me a very tragic, heroic death, and then I don't want to do this anymore. Because way back when they were doing the original trilogy, allegedly, Harrison Ford wanted to be killed off in Return of the Jedi. And then George Lucas said, no, I don't want to do that. That's going to be too sad. I want this to be a happier movie. And it doesn't really surprise me that they killed him off here, especially, and going back to my whole thesis statement about this being just a remake of A New Hope, that scene where Kylo Ren kills Han Solo is shot very similar to the scene where Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's a really huge room. Han is walking towards Kylo, and then you've got Chewbacca. He's up on this one level, kind of looking down, and then higher up you've got Finn and Rey. They're looking down. And as soon as Han was walking towards Kylo, and we see that Chewbacca, Finn, and Rey are all watching from a great distance, helpless, I knew, okay, Han Solo is going to die in this scene. And I was kind of bracing myself for it, and I knew it was going to happen. And I've seen some people out there who said that they were just really emotionally overcome with this movie, and I'm assuming with this scene, because they grew up watching the original movies, and they came to love Han Solo. And I didn't cry. It didn't make me tearful or anything like that, because even though this movie did kill him off, at the end of the day, I can always go back to the original trilogy and watch Han Solo, the Han Solo that I fell in love with. I can always watch him again and again on the original trilogy. But I did feel like his death here, it's a really good way to galvanize this next generation and kind of get them further entrenched into the story. Because you have the character of Rey. I feel like at this point she was still a little undecisive on if she wanted to actually be part of this story. For all we know, at this point, before Han died, she could have just gone back to the planet that she was living on to wait for her family to come back to her. Even though Chewbacca's girlfriend told this girl, hey, listen, your family's never coming back for you. You need to stay with these guys, and you need to help them in this next trilogy of Star Wars movies. Even though that lady told Rey that, I'm not sure if she had really made up her mind. And then once she sees Han Solo die, then she's kind of mad at Kylo Ren, and then she has a good fight scene with him, which is a pretty cool fight scene, although logistically it doesn't really make sense that she would be able to fight somebody who has had training and actually be able to hold her own against him. But I'm willing to forgive that, I guess. But then at the end of the movie, it's like, okay, I am fully part of this world now, and then she goes and she's going to be trained by Luke Skywalker, who, going back to my comparing each character to characters from the original trilogy, I guess Luke is kind of sort of going to be the Yoda of this trilogy. Even though Yoda wasn't introduced until Empire, Luke does not have any lines at all in this movie. He's only in it maybe 1 minute at the very end of the movie. And she goes, and then they have this wordless exchange where they're just looking at each other. And it reminds me very much of how Luke, his initial mentor figure gets killed off, and then he has to go and find a new mentor figure. Well, Rey, her initial mentor figure is Han Solo, and then she has to go and find a new mentor figure, and a very different mentor figure at that. So I really like this movie. It's a whole lot of fun. It's very enjoyable, but I think that's because it's taking all of the best bits from A New Hope, to the point where the big final climax of the movie is basically another Death Star. I did a video recently where I said that Return of the Jedi basically was just really lazy and took the exact same bad guy plot from A New Hope and recycled it. Said, okay, you like the Death Star? Here's a bigger Death Star. Well, in this movie we have yet another Death Star, and it's like 10 times bigger than the original Death Star. And it basically, it's a little different. It draws its power from the sun, and it's able to destroy planets. So it's basically another Death Star, just powered in a different way and destroyed in a little bit of a different way. But it's a Death Star. I kind of wish that we could get a Star Wars movie where the main threat isn't a mechanized terror. What if we had a story where the main threat is more of an internal threat, or something that's a little bit more hero versus hero, or man versus man, rather, and not man versus giant freaking machine. We don't have to have another Death Star. We don't have to have a Death Star in every trilogy, which it seems like we do, apparently. But I feel like this movie, it's one of those things where a lot of people have been getting really hyped up for it, basically ever since Lucasfilms announced that Disney purchased them. Ever since then, and Disney said, okay, we're going to do a new Star Wars trilogy, pretty much since then, people have been getting their hopes up, and they've been getting really hyped up. And this movie was really good, but I feel like a lot of people are unwilling to admit that it does have problems. And for me, my biggest problem is it feels way too much like A New Hope. I wish that this movie could have trailblazed a little bit more. I really like, and I do like this movie a lot, and people are going to watch this video and they're going to say, oh, no, you didn't. You really hated it. I really like that it was able to introduce us to some new characters. Other than Han Solo, who is in this movie the most out of all of the original trilogy characters, other than Han Solo, and I feel like they had to do that in order to give him a proper send-off. They can't just introduce him and then 2 minutes later kill him off. They wanted to give us more Han Solo so that they could permanently get rid of him. Other than him, this movie is not about the continuing adventures of Leia and Luke and 3PO and Han Solo. It's about the adventures of these new kids and how we're going to get some stories about them. And I think when we get episodes 8 and 9, we're going to get even more of that. Now, we will get more Leia and Luke in episodes 8 and 9, I'm assuming, unless they kill one of them off in episode 8. But I really like that this movie was able to make it be the story of these new kids, and it's not the story of Han, Leia, and Luke in their 70s. I really like that. That's probably my favorite thing about this movie. But what I did not like is that the overall story is one that we've seen before, and in a way, it makes it seem like this movie that came out 40 years after A New Hope can't do anything new with the overall structure and narrative of the story. It feels like it just has to copy almost everything about A New Hope. And maybe I'm alone in that thought, but it seems like just initially, after going to see the movie and going and looking online to see what other people are thinking, it seems like most people are really in love with this movie and are kind of unwilling to see that it does have a lot of problems. So those are my thoughts on Star Wars The Force Awakens. What did you guys think? Don't kill me. If you like this movie, tell me why you like this movie. But please be respectful. I didn't like this movie as much as everyone else did. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, although I did like it a lot more than what it sounds like in this video. So those are my thoughts on this movie. If you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back later in the week with some other videos. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.